This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones, the companions left the monastery of Innisquin, having exposed the schemes of Wiglaf, the corrupt abbot, and were journey-bound for the Tower of Angrak. Travelling aboard the Uberdrache, Beric and Canute had a conversation about their homes, during which it emerged that Canute's cousin once removed, Jarl Einar, was in fact Beric's father. But the men's gladness at this revelation was cut short, as the Uberdrache passed a convent at a place called Penlennis, and Canute revealed that it was there that his father had died. We learned in the warrior's backstory that during a raid, the Skarni were ambushed by local forces, and after Jarl Harold had been captured, Canute had fought Lord Cohen in a duel, winning the chance to give his father a death befitting a Skarni, in exchange for his oath. Back in the present, the companions arrived at the fishing town of Mullion, where they rested and resupplied before continuing their journey overland towards Angrak, in the hope of preventing the Brethren of the Purifying Light from recovering the Hellstone known as the Eye of Krevik. However, on arriving at the ancient tower, the companions found the door smashed open, and it was clear that someone or something of ill intent had arrived before them. Chapter 41, Part 1, Day 41, Sunset. Party status: Beric, 37 out of 37 hit points. Lena, 26 out of 26 hit points. Valen, 17 out of 17 hit points. Talion, 21 out of 21 hit points. Canute, 24 out of 24 hit points. Jenna, 12 out of 12 hit points. Arn, 18 out of 18 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Soothe, Revive, and Clairvoyance. Talion has memorized Poetic Prose, Resolve, and Pitch. Lena can pray for 2 first-level miracles and 2 second-level miracles. Jenna can pray for 1 first-level miracle. Beric peered over the rim of his shield as he stepped across the threshold and into the tower, expecting at any moment that an arrow should fly in his direction. But when none came, the warrior felt his muscles become less tense. Bright golden light streaked through the arrow slit on the west wall, falling upon a chamber which had been clearly ransacked. A large trestle table in the centre had been overturned, as had its accompanying benches. The floor was littered with smashed pottery, and a tapestry which hung on the east wall was torn and shredded, whilst in the northeast corner were wooden stairs leading up to the next level. Next to the tapestry, on the east wall, a door leading to the adjoining building was open, and through which a kitchen was visible. It too had been thoroughly ransacked by a person or persons bent on destruction. As the others entered behind him, Beric gestured with his head at the evidence of scouring, and then to the stairs.
"Someone has beaten us to it,"
he observed in a low voice.
"The Brethren,"
Lena gave voice to that which they were all thinking, before looking worriedly at Valen. for she knew that the fanatics would give the mage no quarter.
Let's go,
Beric commanded.
and stay sharp.
The warrior led the way, with Canute one pace behind as they climbed the steps. He grimaced as the wooden boards creaked under their weight, but there was naught for it. The stairs terminated at a sturdy wooden door, and Beric suddenly wished that Keir was there. The rogue's sharp hearing would have immediately told him if anyone lurked beyond it. With nothing else for it, the big man shifted his position and pressed his ear to the door. Nothing. He looked back at the others and shrugged. Then turning his attention back to the door, he gripped the latch loop.
Wait, Beric,
Valen said softly.
I have an idea.
That dice roll you just heard was Beric failing his listen at door check. Before we find out what Valen has in mind, this episode sees both Canute and Talion reach level 5. Let's resolve the fighter first. Rolling a d8 for new hit points. A 6. So with his constitution bonus, Canute's hit points rise to 31. Let's see if he has any ability score increases. Strength. 2. Intelligence. A 6. Canute's intelligence increases to 13. Now the basic expert rules state that Canute should now be able to speak an additional language, but given that he already speaks his native Skarne and the common tongue, I'm going to ignore that for now. Wisdom. A 1. Dexterity. Another 6. Canute's dexterity increases to 13, conferring a +1 to armor class and ranged attacks. Very nice. Constitution. 3. And Charisma. A 1. Well, I'm really pleased with that level up. So now let's do the same for Talion. Rolling a d6 for new hit points. A 1. Oh, that is disappointing. With half min out, Talion's hit points increase to 24. Let's hope he does better with ability score increases. Strength. 5. Intelligence. 1. Wisdom. 5. Talion's dexterity cannot increase further, so let's move on to Constitution. 3. Oh, this isn't looking good. And Charisma. A 6! Talion's Charisma increases to 14, although that will not confer any additional bonus. That was a pretty modest level up for the Bard. However, as a spellcaster, Talion will get access to his first 2nd level Bard spell. As a reminder, I have a custom list of spells for Bards, which you can find at legendofthebones.blogspot.com. There are 5 possibilities, so I'm going to roll a d6, and I will roll again if the result is a 6. Here we go. A 5. Let's see. Oh, nice! Talion's new spell is Imbue. When cast, the Bard's music resonates within an object of the Bard's choosing within 20 feet, imbuing it with the magical energy of the song. The object counts as magical for 1 turn, and all the while emits a melodious sound. While I'm here, it's worth me mentioning that since we last saw Arn, the fighter has reached level 3. I rolled his level up off mic, and aside from new hit points, the Skarne also had ability score increases in strength and dexterity. Now with that done, let's get back to the matter at hand. Valen is going to attempt to cast Clairvoyance. This spell requires the caster to concentrate in a specific direction for 1 turn, and if the casting roll is successful, then Valen will be able to see through the eyes of one creature within 60 feet for up to 12 turns. The mage will need to roll a 17 or less for his casting roll. A 10. Valen bends his will towards the floor above. We shall find out more about that momentarily. In the last episode, we established that there are indeed members of the Brethren of the Purifying Light already in the tower. Let's find out how many. I'm going to say d6 plus 6. Okay, I won't reveal that just yet. I also want to know whether they have spotted the party approaching. Given they are otherwise occupied, I'm going to rule that there is just a 1 in 6 chance that one of them happened to glance out of the window at the opportune moment. Here is the roll. Okay then. Chapter 41, Part 2, Day 41, Early Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged, except Canute now has 31 out of 31 hit points. Talion now has 24 out of 24 hit points. Valen has cast Clairvoyance. Valen closed his eyes and began to center his consciousness firmly within. He honed in, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing, shutting off any intrusion from the world beyond. He became distinctly aware of his pulse. It too was slow and steady, and as he stared at the orange red behind his eyelids, he could almost visualize his heart beating within his chest. How long he remained this way, he could not say. It may have been a minute, it may have been an hour, for in this state, time ceased to have any meaning. Then, instinctively, the incarnation formed in his mouth and was spoken aloud.
Dorduhid, illigate, obech.
A strange sensation encompassed him, as if he was somehow detached from his own body, and despite his eyes remaining shut, he pushed his will upwards, probing forward until vision slowly returned to his eyes. It was blurred at first, but after a few moments became sharp. It struck him immediately that he, or whomever's eyes he looked through, was probably in a laboratory, or at least what used to be one. Like the ground floor of the tower, this chamber had been ransacked. Various pieces of glassware, beakers, vials and flasks, were scattered about, else smashed. The hands in front of him, which looked like those of a man, were grabbing books off a shelf and ripping out the pages. It was an odd feeling to be unable to direct the eyes through which he gazed, nor hear any sound, and he imagined that this was how being paralyzed might feel. Abruptly, the eyes spun away from the book in the hands, and the mage caught sight of the rest of the room. As he suspected, it bore the unmistakable trappings of a laboratory, although most were torn, broken or otherwise destroyed. There were 6 other men in the room, not including the one through whose eyes he looked. Each was clad in mail, over which they wore a white surcoat bearing an emblem of a blazing sun. Valen instantly recognized the men as members of the Brethren of the Purifying Light. The memory of the fanatics attacking Amos's tower at Pencareth came flooding back, as did his grief. But there was no time to dwell. One of the men was on the stairs which led up to the next level. He was speaking animatedly to the others, not that Valen could hear his words. Another man, standing in the centre of the room, began gesticulating, as if giving orders, and the others all stopped what they were doing and drew their weapons. At that moment, the apparent leader turned towards the man, whose eyes Valen saw through. If the mage could have taken a sharp intake of breath, he would have, for he knew the man's face. But not only that, the man's eyes had been put out, and all that remained were dark hollows, with scarred and puckered skin. He had seen enough. Valen's eyes flickered open. His head spun with dizziness as he fought to regain his bearings, and for a few moments he thought he may not be able to control the rising nausea. As the queasiness subsided, he looked upon the expectant faces of his companions.
They know.
Dramatis Personae, Valen. The fresh morning breeze whipped up from the sea and over the headland of Pencareth, blowing locks of Valen's dark hair across his face. In the 2 years since arriving in Powen Moor, Valen had never witnessed such a storm as that which had raged the previous day and all through the night. And it seemed to him that on this bright spring day, the world had woken anew. He would often walk along the cliff tops before beginning his morning chores. Immersing himself in nature this way gave his mind space to reflect and absorb the teachings of his master. He paused and stared out upon the great western ocean. Somewhere, 100 miles or more to the northwest, lay his homeland, Llanrhys. Would he ever see it again? He knew not. The only surety was that he had not the coin to pay the galanas, the life price for Myrddin's death. And so to return would mean at the very least a life of servitude in penance. But more likely as not, he would face the hangman's noose. He continued back towards the tower, the sun warming his back as he went, and whilst it was not cool, the sensation sent a shiver down his spine. Ahead, his attention was drawn to a large number of gulls circling above the small beach which lay at the foot of the cliffs on which the tower sat. He surmised that the carcass of a whale or some other marine mammal had been washed ashore, and he quickened his pace to get a look. Coming up next to the tower, Valen approached the cliff's edge, and looking down, he was greeted by a sight that chilled him to the bone. A large broken section of a ship's hull lay grounded upon the sand. The beach was littered with debris, and at least a score of seemingly dead bodies.
You are a cruel mistress,
he declared, speaking to the ocean. But, he thought, perhaps there may be hope of survivors among the dead. He turned back to the tower. He needed to tell Amos what had occurred.
Amos! Master!
He called as he entered. Amos appeared, coming down the stairs from above.
I have seen Valen,
the old man replied calmly, the hem of his green cloak dragging on the steps as he came. Despite his age, his master was as hale as a much younger man, though in truth, Valen had no idea how old Amos was. His master's treatise, which Valen had read back in his homeland, was at least 50 years old, which would mean that Amos was at least 70. But Valen suspected he was much older. He had green eyes and a long aquiline nose, and his white beard was long like his hair.
Now,
Amos said, reaching the bottom of the stairs.
Go into the laboratory,
he instructed,
and prepare some salves and tonics. Comfrey, lady's mantle and elderflower should do it. And while you are there, find some water skins and bandages. When you are done, go down to the beach and begin to search for survivors. I need to prepare some enchantments. I will join you shortly. With any luck, we may yet save at least one poor soul.
Yes, Master, Valen confirmed, then headed towards the door leading down into the laboratory.
And Valen,
his master called, as if in afterthought.
You are a fine young man, despite what you might think, and you have been a diligent pupil.
Valen was surprised at both the nature and timing of this compliment.
Thank you, Master. Now go, and do not return, whatever you hear.
Again, Valen was puzzled, but he had learnt it was sometimes best not to question. He simply nodded and went down into the laboratory. Whilst involving no spellcraft, the preparation of herbal remedies was one of the first things that Amos had taught him. His master had been keen to stress that the natural world was full of its own wonder, and it was a mage's vocation to harness that as much as the craft. He diligently gathered the ingredients from various jars and bottles upon the shelves, and taking them over to the workbench, he began to grind with pestle and mortar. He worked quickly, measuring and adding the quantities just as Amos had taught him. Once finished, he dispensed his work into some pots and bottles, and placed them in a knapsack. Valen was just about to add one final bottle when there was suddenly a loud bang from the floor above, followed swiftly by shouts. Instinctively, he ducked down behind the workbench as he strained to hear.
Amos ab Awan,
A distant and muffled voice said.
where is the amulet?
Whoever the man was, by his accent, he was a foreigner.
I will not help you. You will kill me regardless.
Valen heard his master reply. He could not understand why Amos would not use his power against these enemies.
True. It matters not. I will find it. And you, Amos ab Awan, you will be in hell. You meddle with that which you do not understand. And I fear death not. I have lived long enough.
Amos said defiantly.
Oh, I understand perfectly.
The foreigner said menacingly.
And you may not fear death, but before you die, you shall feel such torment, to die 1,000 deaths, and Solan shall rejoice. Do it.
There followed the sounds of a struggle. And then suddenly, Amos gave a blood-curdling scream.
Amos!
Eventually, the screams died down. Almost blinded by tears, Valen ran to the stairs. Reaching the top, he placed down the bottle that was still in his hands and gently prized the door open an inch. The acrid stench of burning flesh immediately filled his nostrils, and he struggled to stifle a cough. The smell and smoke threatened to overwhelm him. From his position, he could see 6 mailed men, though he could hear that there were more out of sight. Each wore a white tabard, bearing an emblem of a blazing sun. And there, on the flagstone floor, was the burning body of his master. There was nothing left of Amos's hair or beard. The skin of his face and hands was raw, blistered and charred, and his dead eyes stared lifelessly into Valen's own.
Find the amulet and destroy everything else,
the foreigner commanded. Valen stepped back. He felt sick, but in doing so, he knocked the bottle that he had placed down. It tipped over and rolled down a few steps before smashing. For a moment, he froze.
The apprentice, go!
Valen turned on his heels and leapt down the stairs. Racing across the laboratory, he flung open the door leading down to the sea caves. Behind him, he could hear his pursuers. They had seen him and came shouting triumphantly. He bounded down the steps. He knew there was a small coracle boat kept in the cave. If he could reach it, he might be able to escape. Ahead, there was the faint glimmer of daylight and the sound of waves lapping upon the shore. He was almost there. But then, as he jumped onto the shingle, he landed awkwardly. He lost his footing, and before he knew it, he had fallen prone onto the pebbles. Desperately, he tried to scramble up, but his pursuers were upon him. Many hands pulled him to his feet. He was disorientated.
Burning is too good for a rat like you.
A voice sneered. Valen tried to resist, but was quickly rewarded with a backhanded cuff across the face. His captors dragged him across the shingle to the water's edge, where a wooden bollard was driven into the stones, securing the coracle from floating away when the tide came in. One of them cut the boat loose, and the rope was used to bind him to the post. Valen's head hung down. Perhaps this is justice, he thought. Justice for Murtrin's death. A strong hand gently lifted his head by the chin. The man's face in front of him was surprisingly handsome. He had cropped dark hair and blue eyes. He smiled, which made him more handsome still, which was at odds with his cruelty.
In my homeland,
the man said softly.
We drown witches.
He looked at the sea, and then back at Valen.
But then again, Maybe the crabs will eat you first.
The man seemed to find this amusing. If Valen could have spat in his face, he would have, but his mouth was parched.
What have my kind ever done to you?
He asked hoarsely. The man's smile faded, and his eyes turned cold.
You exist.
And with that, he left, leaving Valen to be claimed by the cruel sea. On the one hand, the companions have lost an element of surprise they might have had, but on the other, this may still work to their advantage. If the brethren decide to take the fight to the party, then they could find themselves on a choke point on the stairs, leaving them open to both melee and missile attack. If not, then the party will need to think of something to break the stalemate. Now the brethren do not know the companions' purpose, but it would be logical for them to surmise that the state of the ground floor of the tower would put these interlopers on alert. So does their leader have enough wisdom to wait it out and let the companions risk making an attack? As you may have guessed, their leader is in fact Adric, the cleric who betrayed Jenna to the followers of Netra at Kerudu. I'm going to make a wisdom check for Adric. If he succeeds, then the brethren will hold their position. Adric's wisdom is 16. Here is the roll. A 15. In addition, Adric will pray for the miracle of bless for his followers. Again, he will need to roll less than his wisdom score for his prayer to be answered. Another 15. He and his followers will receive a +1 to attack, damage and morale rolls for 6 turns. Now you may be wondering how it is that the gods are answering the prayers of the likes of Adric. Well, all will be revealed in time, but suffice to say, the Brethren Cleric's prayers are being answered, but not by whom they think. Finally, given the companions know the Brethren are aware of them, I think it makes sense that they might try to negotiate, at least in an attempt to lull the fanatics into a false sense of security. Now Talion has a spell which could be useful here, Poetic Prose. But before I explain the effect, I first need to make the bard's casting roll. Talion's intelligence is 14, so he will need to roll less than that to succeed. A 10. So far, so good. When Poetic Prose is cast, the bard speaks in verse at the target, and the beauty of their words sways the target's reaction towards them, bestowing a +2 to any charisma check or reaction roll. The target must be able to hear and understand the bard's language. There's no problem there. In addition to the spell, Talion has a +1 charisma bonus, so this reaction roll will be at a +3 in total. Rolling 2d6, higher is better. A modified 12. It doesn't get better than that. Time to find out what all that means. Chapter 41, Part 3, Day 41, Early Evening. Party Status. The party status is unchanged, except that Talion has cast Poetic Prose. The distinctive salty smell of the sea was carried in through the north arrow slit upon the breeze, as Beric cursed at Valen's report. Any hope of surprise had gone, and a full assault through the door would leave him vulnerable to attack from multiple enemies. On the face of it, they outnumbered the Brethren, but there were clearly more levels above, and who knew if any more enemies may come at the sign of a fight. The warrior racked his brain, urgently trying to find a solution, but other than retreating back down the stairs and waiting the enemy out, he had nothing.
So we wait them out?
Canute asked rhetorically, seemingly reading Beric's mind. The big man nodded. I see no other choice.
Perhaps, or perhaps not,
Talion interjected, and the companions all gave their attention to the bard, for he seldom spoke, but when he did, it was worth hearing.
What think you, Talion?
Valen asked.
What if we were to persuade them that we were no threat,
Perhaps even that we share a common purpose.
To deceive them?
Canute scoffed.
Such a course has no honor.
The Scarne repugned, but rather than take offence, Talian's expression was one of mild amusement. Have the Scarne never come in false peace? He teased, knowing the truth. Canute chuckled.
Fair point.
He acknowledged with wry acceptance. What makes you think they'll fall for it? Beric asked, bringing the conversation back to the matter at hand. Talion looked directly at the big man. Because I can be very persuasive when I want to be, the bard said, enigmatically. Very well, Beric agreed. Stand behind Canute and I. If your ruse works, when they open the door, we will push through and take them by surprise. Talion nodded his understanding, and the others readied themselves. Hail! He called. Then after a moment, a muffled voice responded.
Who goes there? What is your purpose?
That's Adric.
Jenna exclaimed in a low voice that was almost a whisper.
He will pay for what he did.
The runic tattoo on Talion's forehead began to glow, blue light reflecting faintly off the stonework, as his brown eyes turned green. My friends unseen, we come in peace this day. No axe to grind, no willows shall be laid. From bow no arrow shot in truest flight, and sword be clothed in scabbard black as night. For words be spoke in love and ne'er in scorn, that sharpest rose prick not our flesh with thorn. So now let quarrel fierce be laid aside, and so our cups shall knock and peace abide. For purpose twinned and in accord shall be, let gate unbar and fellows join with thee. And set shall we the flame of righteous pyre, that heathens burn and smited be in fire. Come, dear friends, let us unite this day, and join in strength to seek elusive prey. The light of Talion's rune receded, and for a few moments the only sound was the distant hiss and roar of the ocean.
Well met, friend.
The muffled voice spoke aloud again, and presently the door's latch clanked, and it began to open. Without warning, Beric sprang forward, barging the door with all his weight. Whoever was beyond it cried out in alarm as the companions rushed in. Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? Returning in the role of Adric is Jordan Carmichael. Jordan is a cast member and the DM of Modified Role, a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons actual play podcast. Also returning, playing the role of Jenna, is Fiona K.T. Howard. Fiona is an actor and improviser, as well as the host of the What Am I Rolling and the DM Book Club podcasts. And finally, returning once again in the role of Canute is Jon Cohen, creator of Tale of the Manticore. I'll put these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. I would also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone.
The storm rages, and beneath it, your village burns. Raiders have taken the survivors, leaving ashes where warmth once thrived. But beneath the ice and despair, an ember of hope can still shine through the darkness. Will you cower in the snowdrifts, or will you raise a group of heroes to forge a path through the blizzard for vengeance and rescue? Fight for survival, defeat your foes, and rescue your people from the clutches of darkness. One Shot in the Snow, a wintry expansion for the One Shot in the Dark RPG. Get your copy now on Drive-Thru RPG.